So I'm at one of my favorite places. I came here 3 years ago, almost to the day, right as the Dixie fire was kind of dying down. And I wanted to come back up and see how it looks here. This is kind of a little bit of an island of mixed and lower severity within the Dixie fire. Kind of both sides of this spot got toasted pretty royally during Dixie. And I came here right after Dixie and made a video, and I was pretty relieved that it wasn't destroyed. And so here 3 years later, just kind of checking out the recovery, and it's quite the place. We're west of Chester, if you recognize this place. I'm not going to say where it is because it's my favorite spot. But it's interesting looking at it. It's a real mix. Right behind me are some giant sugar pine. And then across the way there's kind of thick fir forest, and the fir forest burned really hot. And basically the Dixie fire made a really hard run kind of to the north from south of Chester up towards Juniper Lake. And then it kind of started moving, kind of flanking to the west. And we got a big storm that blew the fire hard out to the east. So this fire, as it came into here, was kind of backing downhill and kind of backing against the prevailing winds. And we talk a lot on here about how kind of backing versus head fire, how, you know, head fires tend to be more destructive. And this has got a mix. There's some head fire that came up the other side of the lake here. Behind me, though, the fire backed down through old growth. There's some giant sugar pine in here and some big white fir. And so, yeah, the big trees have seen a lot of fire in the, 400 or 500 years they've been growing here. The other side really got pretty toasted. So I've been walking around here and have some thoughts on kind of like post-fire land management. In these thickets of white fir that burned hot, there's not a lot of fuel left on the ground. I mean, the ground was really just black after the fire. And so over the next, decade or 15 to 20 years, a lot of that stuff is going to fall down, but a lot of the branches on these trees are really small on fir. And there's a lot of small brush growing up. So over time, we're going to need another fire in here to clean that up. Right now, the Forest Service is really not very adventurous or progressive when it comes to letting fires burn within the Dixie Fire Scar, and neither the Lassen National Forest nor the Plumas National Forest, I feel like they have the public support to manage wildfire, but we've got some real opportunities, and we're going to have to let fires burn in these burn scars unless we want high severity fire in here 20 to 30 years from now. I don't really see any other management tool that's going to work at the scale. And I'm not really talking about, waiting till we get 2 inches of rain in the fall and then doing a prescribed burn, because that kind of fire is not going to consume the branches and the larger larger materials we need to manage here. I mean, we're going to need to let fires burn in here in the summer when it's dry. Otherwise, they're not going to consume. And that's politically, that's a tough thing for the Forest Service. But we got to talk about that, because otherwise, if we just put out all the fires in here for the next 40 years, the next fire that comes through is likely going to kill a lot of the trees that survived the Dixie fire. And so there's a story like this all over the Dixie. Dixie burned 1 million acres. This is a patch of the less extreme outcome, but it's really variable, and every little kind of different patch of severity, and depending on what the stand looked like before the fire, there's a wide variety of needs here moving forward. But in these large areas that the Forest Service is not going to salvage log, which, I mean, the Forest Service has missed the window to really have any marketable product with salvage logging. And in some places they're talking about clearing the land and planting. That's not going to happen on but a very small portion of the public lands that burned. we've got this this mix of severities and patch sizes and everything else that's going to require some management if we want to steer it towards a trajectory of retaining some of the large trees that survive Dixie. So, you know, we'll be talking about this for the rest of my career. But other impressions out here is just that this place is thriving. You know, really, really booming in the burn. There's tons of insects. Sandhill cranes out here. Hawks. Ton of deer sign, bear sign all over the place. Mountain lion, scat, bobcat scat. The brush is coming back thick in the hot burn, and all kinds of browse on that from the deer. Aspen stands got killed have resprouts that are like 8 feet tall, and those are also being browsed on. There's just an incredible amount of food right now for the herbivores. And as such, then as the deer populations recover, then we got food for the predators. But this place is rich, and there's a lot of stuff like this within Dixie. So I think, you know, we had a 1 million acre fire, it devastated 1 million acres. I was like, well, this place is booming. I mean, obviously there's a lot of conifers that were killed, and we tend to have a conifer centric framing around fire and around perceived impacts of fire. And part of that is, you know, the people that are managing the land and that we have given the keys to manage these lands over the last 100 years have been foresters, and foresters like conifers. But there's all kinds of things happening on the landscape that aren't about timber production. And a lot of the worst severity we see out here is because of decisions we've made around selecting timber management as kind of our highest goal of managing a lot of these wildlands. And so driving up here, you know, I drove through, you got this real kind of stark managed versus unmanaged kind of landscape, where the land that the private timber companies are focused on extracting timber value from have been salvage logged and cleaned up and herbicided, and the little trees are planted, and you got basically this biological desert where it's optimum environment to regenerate conifers, which is their goal, but good for just about nothing else. You look at that, you know, side by side with the landscape that hasn't been clear cut and sprayed, and it's pretty clear which one has got more kind of going on for the biology. So in some ways, you know, I'm glad that the Forest Service, sometimes I'm glad the Forest Service lacks the ability to get anything done, because if they really had their way and unlimited resources, a lot of the public land out here would look like the private land. And I think that that'd be a shame, because yeah, there's plenty of land to grow conifers on that's already managed by private companies, but the public land, I mean, I'm out here deer hunting, and there's no food for the deer in those thousands of acres of salvage herbicided land. There's nothing for the deer to munch on, except, you know, there's some strips along the creeks that were left. Versus out here in this land that has not been touched yet, I mean, there's just all kinds of, it's like a buffet. So anyway, you know, not to throw our forester friends under the bus, but I think it's a good time for forestry as a profession to do some more navel gazing about the long-term impacts of this kind of focus they've had over the last 100 years on maximizing the amount of conifer that you can pull off a piece of ground. Because I think what we're seeing in the long term is that, you know, I've been seeing the bumper stickers my whole life, you know, trees are America's renewable resource. And some parts of California, that turns out to not be true. You know, when you look at, you know, the Concal Basin that got logged heavily for 100 years, and then attempted to kind of manage it, kind of start over and salvage log after burns and, you know, clear cut, site prep, herbicide, plant trees, and they burn up in the next fire. And now the private timber companies have pretty much bailed out, and that's going to keep happening. Private timber companies are kind of bailing out of the landscapes where it hasn't panned out, where trees have not been a renewable resource. Old growth's definitely not a renewable resource. And you look around behind me, and if this had all been logged, a lot of what's kind of farther down here is huge sugar pine and fir. A lot of this got helicopter logged when I was a kid, late 80s. They didn't get to here, but if they had, and they'd planted a bunch of little baby trees, those trees would have got cooked in a Dixie fire. Anyway, it's nice to be here. You know, it's a lot. It's so much change in these landscapes. It's kind of a lot to, in our, you know, for us people that are interested in land management. I mean, the raw amount of change on these landscapes in my career and in everyone's career who's working in land management is extreme. It's a lot to process. So I'm glad to have a little time just to kind of sit here at the base of a tree and look at this stuff. I know this landscape. I've been coming here since I was 7 years old. There's logs out here in the bog that I jumped off of when I was, you know, 40 years ago that are still here. And so it's nice to have a reference of kind of check back in with a place. And yeah, good spot. But yeah, just trying to grok that change and what it means. A lot of dead trees. I mean, just a huge amount of dead trees. And I think, you know, dead trees can stand for a really long time. And so a lot of these trees will be standing longer than I will over here on this slope behind me. But yeah, I think we got to let fire have its way in large portions of the Dixie fire that look like this. And the easiest thing to do if you're a fire management officer is you get a lightning strike and it starts a fire over on this slope over here. And you call up your repellers or your smoke jumpers or your hotshot crew, and they go put it out. They cut down that burning snag, they put it out, and then you get kudos from the public for saving them. But that's the easy thing to do, and that's what's happening. And that goes from the district fire management officer all the way up to the region, to the feds at DC. They're saying, yeah, you're gonna put out these fires. But doing that's a big part of what created the Dixie fire. And so yeah, we gotta put fire on these burns, man. It seems, you go out here and walk around and it seems so clear that's what's needed. And part of the problem is that when we get farther down the road here, we've got all these new tree farms on the private land that are now an asset that people with a lot of political power want protected. They don't want fires burning off I mean, it's legit. You don't want your neighbor to start a fire that burns onto your land. But when your land is not fire resilient, not being managed with fire resilience in mind, it's kind of hog tying the Forest Service, where now the Forest Service can't let it burn over here because the private timberland's afraid that a future fire is going to come burn up their investment. So I think one potential option is for the Forest Service to really manage that margin between the private land and the timberland, between the private timberland and the national forest, really intensively. You know, right now, what you've got is this like kind of snag patch and growing brush field that butts right up against private land. And that's the place, if the Forest Service is going to manage anywhere intensely, they should really be managing that margin. and buy some kind of a fuel break so we can actually use fire in the backcountry. Because from here, where I'm standing, we've got tens of thousands of contiguous acres with no one on them. Going into Lassen Park, going up into the east side of the Eagle Lake district of the Lassen National Forest, going down over towards Childs Meadows. Very few cabins, concentrated things that we would want to protect. But other than that, it's just this wild land, this big burn. So I think, the Forest Service needs pressure from the public to get right with fire. There's so much talk about it. We've got the National Cohesive Strategy, and we've got the bipartisan whatever. Got the latest commission, the Wildfire Commission, and they do their findings, and they make all their recommendations, and then nothing changes. We're still going to send a repeller or someone in to put out a snag that's burning in the middle of this. And so, like, when have we done enough planning? Man, just gonna keep putting out the fires. So, like I've said before, my call to you, once you kind of get up to speed with the stuff, is don't tell the forest you appreciate them putting out lightning fires in the middle of a burn. Don't like that post. Ask them why they're posting it. I think it's bad enough that I have to watch them put out all these fires, and then I gotta watch them ask for me to like that on Facebook. They want us to tell them they're doing good, when many of us know that what they're doing is really the wrong thing. That's just gonna perpetuate this imbalance we've got with fire, and that it's really clear to see that if you don't do something about the fuels out here and just let it all accumulate for 50 years and burn hot again, you're just gonna have a brush field. Where right now we have some big trees out here, and but they're not going to stay that way unless we kind of do some housekeeping. So yeah, stop telling the Forest Service thank you every time they put out a lightning fire, and to the Forest Service, why don't you ask your constituents? Don't assume that everyone in Plumas County and Lassen County wants you to put a fire out. Because there's a lot of us that don't feel that way. And if you just go by the folks on Facebook that are telling you that you're doing good when you put out fire, those people might even live in Ohio or something. Facebook is not reality. And I think the Forest Service, a lot of the people who I'm talking about are making these decisions, they know better. They've spent their whole career in fire. They know exactly what's going on. My call to all of you guys is make it more of a priority to teach people why this is important. We all know that it's impossible for you to do it, but teach us why it's needed. Don't just take the easy path. Anyway, don't want to be too preachy, but I can't help it. That's what I think of when I walk around in burnt woods.